recycling of nature's contributions to people. That's fine, we can skip over that. And the key science advance here is that many of these benefits are felt really locally, hyper-locally. And so while some things, when you think at a global scale, you can zoom way out and get a picture even at a pretty coarse scale, other things like the way water travels over a landscape, for instance, and whether the vegetation can capture and retain that water or any pollutants in that water. If you look at the image on the left, it just looks like static. You're missing the pattern. It's kind of all noise. And when you can get to finer resolutions, you can start to make out those streams and the areas around those streams. And so in this case, it's like the details are what matters, and if you can't do this at a high spatial resolution, then it's kind of not worth doing. And so it's really only been in recent years that we've been able to do this, because through advances in computational capacity and satellite data having finer and finer resolution imagery, we've increased the capabilities over 1,000-fold. So this is, what's exciting about this is really like the possibilities that this unlocks, and this is really just kind of our first foray into that. There's a lot more work to be done. Okay. Okay, great. So there we mapped 12 of nature's contributions to people locally that are ranging from provisioning benefits, like grazing, fuel wood provision, timber, marine fisheries and riverine fisheries, and then also regulating benefits like nitrogen retention, pollination, coastal protection, sediment retention, and flood mitigation, and then a variety of cultural benefits. So we looked at coral reef tourism specifically, but also access to nature, just people within a given travel time from nature as a proxy for a huge array of cultural benefits that we couldn't actually represent globally. So we're trying to use this as a placeholder, and this is a huge need for people to get involved in the future. At the same time, all of those were local benefits that we prioritized at the country scale, so each country individually. And then we also put alongside that carbon storage and sequestration and atmospheric moisture regulation by vegetation as these broader continental or global scale priorities that also need to be considered when we're talking about nature's contributions to people. Okay, and then so these are the maps that go along with those services. We can keep going. So what we found is 30% of the of lands can provide 90% of the value to people. 24% of the ocean within the EEZs of countries can provide 90% of the total aggregate value of nature's contributions to people. And the way we looked at this was through a prioritization and optimization across weighting all objectives equally. So it's ensured that all of these benefits that I just showed you can be maintained at 90% of their current levels. And you can see how the curve on the left, as you move along the x-axis, greater percent of area, you start to get diminishing returns after that point. That's why we picked 90%, because at that point it takes considerably more area to continue to add incrementally more value. So that last 10% certainly provides value to people. That's important too, but we see there's a lot of efficiency potentially in this first 30%, that if we can capture these places, we can maintain a lot of the current levels of values to people. Next. We also looked at how those local benefits overlap with global benefits, like the carbon storage and atmospheric moisture recycling that I talked about. And the good news is that 80% of these areas that are critical for local benefits also deliver climate benefits. So this is where we really need to be thinking about these two COPs working together to find the win-wins and find these areas that can deliver on these multiple goals, while also recognizing that some, 20% of the area is left out, and it's still really critical for people if we want to maintain current levels of benefits. So we have to think about other mechanisms for maintaining those places, even if they aren't as valuable on the climate goals. Next. And the same thing is true for biodiversity at the species level. So these areas, these critical natural assets for local benefits, can represent 60% of the area requirements of terrestrial vertebrates. That's 73% of birds, 66% of mammals, and but only 34% of endemic species. On the other hand, it also represents 96% of indigenous languages. So these are areas that are clearly really important culturally as well. And so again, it's important to consider how to manage for all of these multiple objectives and what's being left out from different conversations, whether we have a species focus or a nature's contributions to people focus. And then finally, we were looking at how many people actually benefit from these areas. So 87% of the global population benefits from critical natural assets. This is because we prioritize them within every country. So every country has a certain amount of critical natural assets that are benefiting their population. And what's interesting, sorry, I think there's one more animation, is that only 16% of the population live on these lands. So clearly a small number of stewards are providing a huge amount of value to the world's population. And we need to think about how to continue to support those stewards so that they can continue to maintain those benefits. Okay, yeah, we'll just keep going. So what this comes down to, I think, in terms of relevance for the Global Biodiversity Framework, is that what we're finding is that areas that really matter to people are not necessarily these remote wild places that are often the focus of conservation efforts, but they're areas that are closer to people. They're upstream from cities. They're within an hour's travel from large populations, or they're areas that are accessible and used and appreciated and valued by people. So we can't forget those areas. They need conservation attention just as much as those wild lands. Also, we have to beware cutting off access to some of these areas. So again, protection is not the only tool in our conservation tool belt. We have to think about the uses that make these areas so valuable to so many people and how to sustainably manage them, how to ensure that they continue to prosper for the future. And local and indigenous stewardship offers some of the greatest opportunities for that, for the maintenance of those values. And then finally, which we really can see through the overlap with those indigenous languages. You can just see what a rich cultural representation there is within these areas. And then finally, critical natural asset mapping can be used to inform priority setting at the global, but also national and subnational levels. And I would just really emphasize here that this is an approach more than anything else. It's not that these data are the final answer. They are a starting point. And the approach that we've developed here can be replicated at the national and subnational scales with local data, with local context to try to build an appropriate approach for those particular places. So the last thing is we have a viewer if you want to zoom into your own areas to take a look. And I've just highlighted a few places around here, including our hosts in Quebec and in Kunming, but also highlighting Peru, which we're going to hear a little bit about here. There's a variety of different ways you can look at those overlaps that I showed you. You can look at the critical natural assets themselves, or you can look at each individual NCP, nature's contributions to people, and turn the different elements on and off to see what it looks like in your area. So I hope you'll check it out. The data are all free and downloadable at that site. The paper is open access, so please take a look and let us know what you think. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Becky. So that's fascinating, right? We now have new data available to us that can really help us set priorities for these places that really matter for humans. And what some of these maps that Becky showed us confirm, for what we've all suspected or just intuitively known for a very long time, is that there are some places like, the Amazon, including Peru, which have a lot to offer in terms of human benefit. And so we're now going to hear from Roxana Solis from the Ministry of Environment in Peru to tell us how this can help inform their work at the national level. So Roxana, please come up. Diego.
Sí, me escucha. Muchísimas gracias por la invitación.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Después de una presentación como la que hemos visto, en que prácticamente nos puede haber sensibilizado, la parte política tiene que hablar, ¿no? ¿Qué estamos haciendo?
After a presentation like this, that we have seen the scientific part, it sensitizes us so that the political part can also act.
Ok, a ver, acabamos de nosotros en Perú aprobar la Política Nacional del Ambiente, ¿no?
In Peru, we just have approved the national policy for the environment.
¿No? Y esta política trata de, es una política transversal. No podemos mirar al tema del ambiente solamente desde el punto de vista de conservación, sino sabemos que hay también uso sostenible, hay productivo, etcétera,
So
¿no?
this policy is not just one sector; it's cross-cutting, transversal. No, it has productive aspects, different aspects as well that have to be considered.
Lo interesante de esto, sorry, ¿te corté?
Dale, dale.
¿Sí? Lo interesante de esto es que nosotros, como decisores para una gestión sostenible, que a mí me parece un término que para un sector puede resultar un concepto y para otros sectores otro concepto.
The important part for us as managers, sustainable managers, which is a concept that can be interpreted differently by different people.
Exacto. Entonces, en Perú, lo que se trabaja mucho es tratar de impulsar la meta 14, que es el mainstreaming, ¿no?
So in Peru, what we are trying to push mostly or mainly is Target 14.
Pero tenemos un trabajo ya reconocido a nivel nacional con el sistema de áreas naturales protegidas.
But we have in Peru already an advanced work in the National Protected Area System.
El Sistema Nacional de Áreas Protegidas tiene, de lo que yo veo en grueso el mapa, tiene varias zonas muy importantes que tienen población, tienen indígenas, entonces, y tratan de conservar los ecosistemas que son más valiosos, lo que una vez escuché, ecosistemas irrecuperables, ¿no?
No.
Eso es muy importante entenderlo.
So, from what I have been able to see really quickly, the natural protected, the system of natural protected areas in Peru, the natural protected areas coincide with many of those places that have been selected as, indicated as key, and also they have indigenous peoples on them.
Entonces hay un trabajo de reconocer que las poblaciones que están en estas zonas tienen que subsistir, o sea, no vamos a solamente tener un área para contemplarla. Nosotros tenemos que ver que si bien esto es un capital natural para el bienestar de la población, necesitamos que esas prácticas sean las prácticas que tengan mayor modelo, como lo mencionan en la meta 10 y en la meta 11, ¿no?
So, these natural protected areas and the indigenous people that live in them, the management, they have to be managed in such a way that some of those resources at least can be sustainably used, not only be there to be looked at.
Uno de los modelos, por ejemplo, algo que está haciendo el Perú ahorita es ya identificó por región todas las áreas degradadas y el porcentaje de áreas degradadas que incrementa un porcentaje de 22 millones aproximadamente, menos que hay en Perú. Entonces yo sé que el tiempo, se está tratando de impulsar, ¿no?, en este periodo y aprovechando la década de la restauración, en trabajar todo lo que es la identificación para empezar un plan de restauración de ecosistemas degradados.
So in Peru, what we have done is done an identification of areas that also have been intervened. Know that some are about 22 million hectares. So now the plan is to see how those areas can start to be restored.
Los diálogos intersectoriales o multisectoriales son muy difíciles, porque cada sector responde a un tratado o a un acuerdo. ¿Cómo lograr que ese acuerdo, que está en varias convenciones, por ejemplo, una organización que está en varias convenciones o tratados como FAO, ¿no? ¿Cómo lograr que el mensaje de manejo y de sostenibilidad se dé en todos estos sectores? Porque, como les digo, la interpretación y el alcance no es lo mismo decir, acuñar el término sin entender los enfoques que hay que aplicar.
So that's a hard
Sí.
concept. So the idea is that it's difficult not to manage through different conventions and different, these multidisciplinary or different sectors, and how to make them all match.
Claro, la articulación entre todos estos sectores para el compromiso con la meta 10, con la meta 8 y con la meta 11 es vital, es vital.
So the sectors have to work together so that the targets 8, 10, and 11 can be met.
Porque tiempo, me pasé. En realidad, yo hago un llamado, ¿no? En que podamos entender que si bien hay personas aquí presentes que pueden estar en una organización civil o en el sector público.
So I invoke people here. They might be in NGO or they might be in the government.
Que los diálogos,
That the
¿no?
dialogues
tienen que darse porque la conceptualización no está muy clara.
Because
no está clara.
There are some topics that are still not clear, some terms that are still not clear, and that needs to be.
Sí, y la aproximación que hacemos desde los sectores, si no miramos, porque yo les digo, el integrar las convenciones solo de Río a veces no es prioridad política.
So for the different sectors,
y es
for
una
the different
necesidad.
Ministries,
Es una necesidad. Entonces tenemos que ser,
work together.
no sé, tener mucha inteligencia emocional, creo yo, y hacer los diálogos necesarios, porque no es una tarea fácil.
So dialogues
no es una tarea fácil.
It's not easy, but
Estamos
it's important.
Inmersos de mucha crítica, pero estos resultados deberían exponerse al más alto nivel en cada uno de los sectores públicos de mi país, ¿no?
So
Muchas gracias.
these results, this information needs to be made at the highest level in the different ministries. They need to be made aware of these results.
Thank you. So sorry.
Stay here.
All right, thank you, Roxana. So, as Becky told us, many of the areas that are providing global scale services that 87% of the globe is benefiting from are actually populated very sparsely, right? And that means that it's the local communities and the indigenous peoples in those areas that are really, playing this important role for all of us. And so now, after having heard about the national level in Peru, we're going to hear from the local level. So, Ucela Ashayap is from the Alto Mayo region of Peru in the Champuyacu community, and she is going to give us her perspective from that level.
Buenos días con todos y con todas que están presentes acá en ese hermoso lugar. Mi nombre es Uciela Chayap Sejecam, de la comunidad nativa Champuyacu, distrito Aguajún, de Alto Mayo.
Good morning to everyone who's here in this beautiful place. My name is Uciela Chayap Sejecam. I am the president of the NUAS Association, Forest Association, and I come from the Champuyacu community in the district of Aguajún in San Martin. Next, please.
Bueno, nosotros trabajamos 5.000 hectáreas, tenemos 5.000 hectáreas de área donde nosotros vivimos, pero el bosque tenemos 400 hectáreas que reservamos como mujeres emprendedoras que hoy en día manejamos estas hectáreas para poder mantener el bosque.
So our community is around 4,900 hectares. Is that what it is? Yeah, 4,900 hectares. And we have in the community around 500 hectares remaining of forest only. And we, as the Women's Association of Shampuyaku, have received from the community, from the assembly of the community, el encargo, I don't know what the word is, the task of conserving these hectares, this forest.
Siguiente, por favor.
Next.
Bueno, en 2015 hemos empezado a trabajar con 70 mujeres, pero hay una breve historia que voy a contar. Son 3 mujeres lideresas que han empezado preocupadas en el bosque porque estábamos perdiendo el medio ambiente, el agua, el río y también el bosque.
So in 2015, now we are around 70 women, but in 2015, the origin of this association was 3 women, 3 leaders of the community, 3 women leaders, worried about the state of the community, about the remaining forests, about our resources, our waters, wanted to do something about it.
Bueno, en actualidad somos 70 mujeres que trabajamos, somos jóvenes, empezaron nuestras lideresas, pero ahora formamos mujeres jóvenes que están preocupados y trabajamos, ¿no? Esos son los trabajos que nosotros elaboramos dentro de nuestra comunidad.
So in the beginning, these 3 women who went to the community and wanted to do something about it, where the leaders were older women, wise women. Now we are 70, and many of us are young women, and we learn from our leaders, from our elders, different. Try to also.
Bueno, antes nosotras no teníamos la oportunidad para ser partícipe como mujer aguajún, pero cumplimos un reto donde en las comunidades hay bastante machismos, pero nosotras como mujer joven hemos luchado para que las jóvenes también tengan la oportunidad para que sean conocidas y que tengan esa oportunidad para que ellos también puedan trabajar. Entonces, en actualidad, las jóvenes son los que más participan en las reuniones, en diferentes actividades que nosotros convocamos.
So for us, it hasn't been easy as women to get where we are now, particularly being young women. So now we have a place, a place in the community, a place in the leadership, and we have different activities where young women participate.
Y eso no quiere decir que nosotros ya estamos 100% asegurados, pero falta muchísimo trabajo que nosotros tenemos que cumplir en nuestras comunidades. Por eso estamos con nuestros aliados para que ellos también nos puedan apoyar y también que sigan orientándonos para que nosotros también seguimos trabajando.
So doesn't mean that we are 100% there. We are still learning, we are still working, but yes.
Siguiente. Aquí vimos diferentes actividades. En nuestro bosque, donde nosotros estamos cuidando, manteniendo el bosque, nos produce en diferentes plantas medicinales, también frutales, que hoy en día nos contamos.
This forest that we are taking care of provide us with these different goods, these different services. For example, food, for example, building materials for our homes, medicinal plants as well, economic income through the sale of different products.
Y entonces nosotras como mujer no solamente estamos solos, trabajamos articuladamente con Conservación Internacional y también con Feria, ¿no? Esa es la imagen donde nosotros como primer comunidad hemos empezado para que las comunidades, de diferentes comunidades que tienen su bosque, que tengan un ejemplo y así puedan trabajar y rescatar reforestar y cuidar y también lo que son los costumbres ancestrales.
So what we see here is I forgot the different activities and that the nature provides, the forest provide, and this work is being done through, with us, but also by us, but also with the help of Conservation International, and also with FERIAM, which is the Federation of Awajún communities of the Alto Mayo, which works with all the communities of the Alto Mayo. And this experience is a pilot, a model, if you want, a pilot experience that, with the help of FERIAM, can be taken to shared with the other communities as well.
Es entonces, yo estoy encantada de estar acá y representar nuestros trabajos que nosotros hacemos día a día. Y bueno, con este aporte que estoy dando, espero que hayan gustado también, para que ustedes también puedan venir a conocer en nuestra comunidad en Perú. Bueno, somos Awajún que trabajamos y luchamos, y bueno, no vamos a cansar, vamos a continuar para que nuestras comunidades y diferentes pueblos también tengan el mismo manejo.
So
Muchas gracias.
I'm thrilled to share this experience with you. That you can see the work that we have done, a work that we're not going to be tired of doing. We are going to continue to be doing in the future, and I'm happy to be here, and we're welcome to visit us in Peru, and thank you very much.
Okay, muchas gracias, Usela. Thank you. So, as our final speaker, we have Ann Decker, the Vice President of Environment from BHP. And as Roxana really emphasized, right, getting this right on the ground is a multi-sector approach. And that means we have to have the private sector involved. So Ann is going to tell us a little bit about how she is approaching these kind of things in her work at BHP.
Hi, I'm Anne, and given this is my first COP, I'm really excited to be here. And I'd like to thank Conservation International, for which BHP has had a strategic alliance since 2011, for inviting us along to give a perspective from the private sector, in particular how BHP is approaching people and nature. Okay, next slide, thanks. And next one. You can read that one later if you want. Next one. Okay, so like all other sectors, our approach has been evolving, and I think this slide here represents best our current approach. So here we have our 2030 People, Planet and Prosperity goals that were released in June this year. And we have a healthy environment goal, and these goals are presented within our social value framework. And although the goals sit under a single pillar, we anticipate that the work that we will be doing to deliver those goals will end up delivering outcomes across multiple pillars. Now, our healthy environment goal there is to create nature-positive outcomes by having at least 30% of the land that we steward, so that's land that BHP owns, leases and manages, under nature-positive management practices, so either conservation or improved management or restoration, with a focus on areas of high ecological value, both within our operating footprint and within our operational area, and in partnership with communities and Indigenous peoples. So you'll see in the target that we have recognised not only nature's contribution to people, but also that nature should be a beneficiary of positive actions from people. And we intend to be able to show our progress along that journey through using tools such as natural capital accounting, and probably also novel techniques for monitoring ecosystem health, such as environmental DNA. Now, I'll just provide a little bit more colour about how we've looked at this target. So BHP owns, leases and manages more than 6 million hectares of land when you exclude greenfield exploration. But less than 2% of that is within our mining operational footprint. So within the mining operational footprint, that 150,000 hectares, we have minimum performance standards which require the application of the mitigation hierarchy. And we've had those in place since 2014. But when we look at application of the mitigation hierarchy and really long life mine assets, it can be quite difficult to get to a position of net positive within that operational disturbance footprint within a reasonable time frame for nature. So since that time, we've also had a voluntary commitment to contribute to conservation outside of our footprint. And since 2014, and that was one of the objectives of the Alliance with Conservation International, we've made significant conservation investments in Peru and Australia and Chile and Kenya, but also a number of other investments of a smaller size around the globe from our operational assets. So when we looked at the framing of our 2030 goals, we looked and we saw that we had really good commitments inside the operational disturbance footprint, which we absolutely need to continue to focus on, and we have some outside. But then if we thought about the challenge we have with halting and reversing nature loss, and if we think about how nature needs scale and connectivity, we decided that the piece that was missing, so the focus of our additional work, should be on the non-operational land, so the rest of the 6 million hectares. I'm going to now provide you a couple of examples of current work that we've got underway that show the intersect between people and nature. Now, this piece of work here is taking place at our Nickel West operations in Western Australia on one of the assets where the Chihuahua people are the native title holders. And over the last couple of years, the Chihuahua have been working to map all of the cultural values on their lands that are around our asset. And some of the Nickel West people have been going out with them on country as a two-way learning exercise. And at the end of that process of mapping, where they were looking at cultural values, including ecosystem services such as the provision of food and bush medicine, there was a big workshop to look at all of the information that had been collected. And obviously all of this information is the intellectual property of the Chihuahua. So it was a really good conversation about how that information should be documented, how it should be stored, and to what extent it should be shared. And as I say, that was a decision for the Chihuahua. And then we supported them on the information that they wanted to share to put together a handbook. And they've used this handbook as part of the engagement and capacity building and capability building of the next generation or the upcoming generation of custodians. So it's been a really good resource for them, and it's been a great resource for our people at the operating site to get greater insights into the cultural values that are associated with the Chihuahua land that they live and work on. We see that piece of work as a really critical foundation to inform future conversations that we would have with the Chihuahua around how we can co-design proposals for any future mining activities that we might have on Chihuahua lands. And the next one I'd like to share is one of our social investments. So this is the one outside of our operational footprint. And this one is in the southern part of the Great Barrier Reef near Keppel Islands, or Wapabara and Kanomi, Great Keppel and North Keppel Island. And this was really informed by us wanting to help with some of those really key scientific questions around coral larval settlement and survival. So there was a real scientific question there to be asked and answered, because that information is critical to being able to better manage coral reefs in terms of future resilience. So we talked to the Australian Institute of Marine Science, and because the project is where the Fitzroy Basin, it's downstream of the Fitzroy Basin where BHP has operating sites. They brought along the Wapabara people in the very first meeting that we had. And so the whole project was co-designed with the Wapabara right from the start. We made sure that we had their sought and got their free, prior, informed consent before we went onto any of their country to conduct the work. We had some really interesting insights into ways that cultural views influenced the experimental design and changed it in some areas. It has a very strong element of capacity building, including training and Indigenous traineeships. And for the Wapabara, whose ancestors were forcibly removed from Konomi and Wapa more than 100 years ago, it provided an opportunity for the Wapabara descendants to get together on country for the very first time, which was really special. And so this is a great example of a project that's already providing great outcomes for people, and we're sure that the science is also going to provide great outcomes for nature. Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to move on to do some questions. So I'd like to invite everybody, all the speakers, to please come up. We've got just about 10 minutes left, so I do have some questions for the speakers, but I'd like to see first if there's anybody in the audience with questions, because I want you to have as much time as possible to ask your questions. Any questions from the audience? Please, there's a microphone here.
Gracias. La puedo hacer en español porque es para Roxana del Ministerio. Muchísimas gracias, Roxana, por la presentación. Y al final de su presentación mencionó sobre la importancia de los diálogos entre sector público y sociedad civil para conceptualizar y tropicalizar a nivel nacional. ¿Qué pasa con el sector privado también? Y en Perú, ¿qué tipo de espacios se están abriendo para transversalizar las agendas entre el sector público, sociedad civil, empresas, para después que se vea reflejado en las actividades en campo? Muchas gracias.
No sé quién me va a traducir.
Yo te traduzco, no te preocupes,
Sí,
acá
ya,
estoy.
perdón, yo te dije. ¿Eres de una empresa? Sociedad civil. Mira, en el Perú, en el convenio hace varios años, hubo una iniciativa que se llamaba BI, Biodiversidad y Empresas.
In Peru, a couple of years ago, there was an initiative called BI, which was Biodiversity and companies, business.
Entonces, se identificaron muchas empresas, ¿no?, que cumplían no solo desde el punto de vista de responsabilidad empresarial, sino que tenían la intención de modificar porque dependían de la biodiversidad.
Many businesses were identified, because they managed, they complied with the requirements, social responsibility requirements, but because they were also interested in working, and also because they needed the resources from biodiversity.
Entonces, esa iniciativa, el problema que hay en el sector público es que cambian autoridades, cambian prioridades, ¿no?
So the problem is that when you work with the public sector, change in the authorities means change in the policies.
Todos vivimos eso en nuestros países.
We all
todos,
live that in our countries.
¿no? Entonces, pero ahora con el compromiso de una meta para lo que es consumo y producción sostenible, es necesario acercarnos, es necesario dialogar, es necesario saber que esa biodiversidad se acaba.
But now that we have a target, related to this, there is no other option. We have to work on this. Biodiversity resources are ending.
La apertura está. ¿no? Al menos en Perú ya hemos identificado y estamos trabajando con, por ejemplo, hay una iniciativa en los aguajales de aguaje, de las palmeras, antes talaban. Ahora se les ha enseñado, porque ya han aprendido hace años, pero el trepar para no talar.
So in Peru, we are open for these kinds of work, to work with businesses. An example of this is in the wetlands of the Amazon, where they have palms trees, millions of hectares of palm trees.
Sí.
The fruit can be harvested. Normally, it used to be that they cut the trees down, the palms down. Now, people are being trained to climb instead of cutting down the palm for the fruit.
Y una empresa, a los que hacen esa actividad ¿no? para sacar el aguaje, han generado todo un mercado de refrescos, ¿no? que está traspasando también las fronteras, y eso se les da un reconocimiento a las comunidades o a los proveedores del aguaje que lo sacan así.
So there is one large business, juice and soft drink maker that supplies buys from this aguaje from these sustainable producers, and is creating a market for these soft drinks or for these juices. Even that they're going to trespassing the frontiers, no? Yeah.
Okay.
No voy a seguir, pero puedo seguir.
Thank you, Roxana. Any other questions? Right here, please.
Buenos días con todos. Edward, presidente de la Feria de Puebla Bajún. Va con la señorita Roxana. Desde el Ministerio del Ambiente, ¿qué mecanismos o cómo está implementando o asegurando la biodiversidad del bosque de comunidades indígenas, en especial en San Martín Alto Mayo? Gracias.
Okay, question for Roxana.
No es una pregunta fácil, porque el Perú tiene muchísimas comunidades, pueblos indígenas.
It's not an easy question. Peru has many indigenous communities all throughout the Amazon.
Pero el tema es que hay un Ministerio de Cultura que tiene la responsabilidad, ¿no? Y el Ministerio de Cultura está dentro de la Comisión Nacional de Diversidad Biológica.
So there is the thing is, in Peru we have a Ministry of Culture, and this Ministry of Culture is part of the Commission for Biodiversity.
Así es. Sabemos, porque hemos tenido 2 talleres para preparar el marco, 2 talleres con comunidades indígenas representando a estas poblaciones, y lo que es justo, porque en este momento tenemos un director que ha vivido 30 años en la Amazonía.
So we've had 2 workshops, for including cultural aspects in the convention, in the work. So and right now, even our director general is somebody who has lived in the Amazon for 30 years. So we know about this.
Sí, y en esas reuniones hemos escuchado las necesidades que hay,
So we
las
heard
injusticias que hay.
in these
¿no?
workshops where communities and representatives of indigenous peoples have participated, we've heard about the injustices, we've heard about the needs and the priorities.
Y lo primero que hicimos es, porque te soy sincera, las comunidades iban a cambio climático a las convenciones y nosotros no teníamos representación indígena en estos espacios.
So,
Verlos a ustedes, a nosotros nos agrada
so
como
to be
ministerio.
sincere with you, normally indigenous peoples, we've seen them go to the climate change meetings and COPs, and this is the first time that we see indigenous peoples participated in the biodiversity topic.
Hicimos las gestiones para que la Cancillería también pueda hacer las cartas de envío. En cuanto al terreno, lo que se está haciendo con el CERNAN es generar algunas actividades productivas, porque considero que ustedes son los que tienen el mayor derecho de levantar su nivel de vida encontrando un mercado. Eso es lo que se está haciendo ahorita.
So through, for example, the natural protected areas services of Peru and other. No, we think it's important to work with the communities in activities that can help increase the benefits related to biodiversity and income.
Y estamos solicitando al Ministerio de Cultura tener una reunión con ustedes porque esta situación tiene que cambiar. O sea, nos hemos dado cuenta que hay escenarios que no pueden continuar así. No pueden desaparecer defensores ambientales indígenas. No, eso no puede
And also, we're meeting with the Ministry of Culture. We know that this is a situation that cannot continue. No, being cultural, indigenous representatives, their lives be in danger, and so this is something that we want to work with the Ministry of Culture.
Okay,
Esa meta 21 tienen que cumplirla. Gracias.
Gracias, Roxana. Okay, so as we go into the last few minutes, I just have a question that I'd like to pose to each of the participants. So what we've seen today, right, is a scientific analysis that gives us, a new way to look at things. So how do you see using this applying this to your own work? How does it inform your work or complement it? Okay. And we'll start over here with Usela.
Bueno, hola. Bueno, gracias, Roxana. Nos encontramos acá, ¿no? Sobre las investigaciones. Bueno, para mí sería enfocar más con las comunidades, porque ahí faltaría, investigar más. Porque hablamos de las investigaciones, hay bastantes situaciones que pasan en las comunidades.
So, regarding the research that has been presented, it provides an opportunity to work more with communities.
Claro, porque yo vengo de la comunidad y conozco muy bien la problemática que nosotros tenemos, que estamos pasando dentro de la área del bosque, ¿no? No solamente hay que enfocar del bosque, también hay que enfocar lo que es cambios climáticos.
So, me living in the community, I can see that the problems, the challenges of conserving the forest are very difficult, and also not only biodiversity but also climate change.
En este caso sería, hacer un convocatorio, o si no con las diferentes comunidades, como por ejemplo tenemos una federación que representa en las comunidades, para que ellos también tengan, un espacio, que tengan esas oportunidades para que las comunidades, para que puedan trabajar con las comunidades. ¿Y qué pasa? Bueno, en este caso nosotras hemos convocado lo que es bono carbono.
So it's important not to work not only with my community but with all communities. So for example, in the case of Feriam, all the communities in Alto Mayo, and to face the different challenges that we have.
Claro, entonces, bueno, es algo muy preocupante que pasa en nuestro país y enfoquemos más en ese trabajo. Hay otras más comunidades que, bueno, nos cuentan, y tampoco no son conocidas y necesitan esas oportunidades. Y ellos tienen bastante en bosque, área grande, pero no son conocidas y es como decir que son olvidadas.
So,
entonces tenemos que trabajar ese tema.
We have to work with other communities. I mean, as a community, we have many opportunities. But there are many other communities that are forgotten and that they need to be also worked with.
Okay, thank you.
Gracias.
Gracias. All right, Anne, over to you.
Okay, I really congratulate Becky on this work. It's a really great piece of research, and I think the more tools that we have in our toolkit to be able to look at what are priority areas for nature and areas for people and what the overlap is for those will help us prioritise where we can most effectively act for BHP, both within the area that it stewards, but also in the voluntary conservation investments we make outside of our footprint. So thank you, commend you for that.
viendo todo este escenario, ¿no es cierto? Y evidenciando una situación mapeada con datos donde tú puedes visualizar una necesidad de mayor conocimiento porque es un mapa global.
When you look at the information and you can see it in a map, it becomes evident that there is a need for more information. No? One thing is to have a global view or a world view, but
Sí, o sea, la idea es, si estamos hablando de ecosistemas irrecuperables, si estamos hablando de ecosistemas proveedores de bienes y de valores y de servicios ecosistémicos, tenemos que conocer y no solo identificar de manera gruesa un fruto o sus propiedades, sino cuáles son esos principios activos. Hay una gama inmensa de investigación que requieren esas áreas.
so we need find more detailed information in terms of geography. It's good to have a general information, but then we need to focus as the next step maybe on the details of the services and the different plants and
Así es.
all kinds of different services.
Simplemente con áreas protegidas es un banco genético para lo que es microbiología del suelo.
For example, natural protected areas by themselves are a genetic bank of, for example, just soil,
Caracterizar los suelos de las áreas protegidas es una necesidad.
So just in terms of soils, to give an example, it's a necessity.
Okay. Thank you. So Becky, the last word to you, in case you have any additional
How am I going to use
comments.
this work in my work? Yeah.
Exactly. Any
No,
reflections?
I mean, I couldn't agree more, honestly. I think that is the thing I'm most excited about now is that we've shown it can be done. If it can be done globally, it can be done anywhere. And so it really is a question of like what other sources of information can we bring to complement some of the global sources of information and bring that local context? Because I think, and I think this is true of the GBF too, the real interesting part is the implementation. So it's great to get the framework out there and to get, galvanize people and get them excited about possibility, but I so look forward to working at the country level with visionaries like yourself.
All right. Well, thank you to all of our speakers and to our intrepid interpreter. Thank you all for being here, and I hope you have a great rest of the COP.
Hello. Everyone, just in case you fancy a little something different, we have a wrapper coming now in the cafe area. So please stay around for that.